Bryony, I think it's fair to say that spin bowling in this country is in a bit of a pickle at the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be as valued as it once was. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure, but I do know a man who does.
Shall we get him on then?
Let's.
I'm Bryony Brock.
And I'm Nathan Wood.
Welcome to the Cricket Mind podcast.
So today's guest is former professional cricketer Rob Ferley, who is known as one of the most progressive and innovative thinkers in the modern game, or at least that's what it says on ChatGPT. As a cricketer, Rob played for both Kent and Nottinghamshire as a left-arm spinner, and also represented England at under-19 level. And post-playing career, he's gone on to become a very well-regarded coach, gaining his level 4 coaching qualification a few years ago. And he's now the head of cricket performance at Bradfield College. And more recently, he's ventured into the world of business, co-founding Square One Cricket, which is a new development centre in Brighton that's aiming to rethink how players learn and progress in the game. All very exciting stuff. So, Rob, welcome to the show. Are you happy with that description by ChatGPT?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I suppose the main thing you mentioned there was the level 4 meeting you and having to be careful about what I say just to make sure I pass. So presumably today I can say what I want.
Well, you can, because I'm not in that position anymore, and neither are you. So it's a free-for-all. That's fine with us. So we're going to be exploring spin bowling today, something that I know you're very passionate about. Can you remember why and when and where that passion first began?
Can actually. And when I was younger, my mum and dad separated when I was really young, and I used to go once every 3 or 4 weeks to my dad's and stay at his house with my brother and sister. And back in those days, there was no thought about not playing club cricket on a Saturday, even if you had a kid. So we were just dropped on the boundary, and we were left to crack on. And my brother was 4 years older than me, and I used to steam in and try and bowl pace, and I could never get him out. And the rules were, unless I got him out, I didn't bat. So after the sort of second hour of bowling, I decided that it was better off the short run to try some spin. Um, the end part of that story is I actually ended up getting him out, like when I got a bit older, getting him out and then batting for probably only half an hour, and he just ended up um, going back to the pavilion and not bowling at me anymore. So he didn't like it when the shoe was on the other foot. But that would be the earliest memory. And then obviously because of that, starting to bowl it and probably having a little bit of success, just continued on that route.
So you started bowling spin because you didn't like the hard work that came along with fast bowling. That's what I was hearing anyway. Is that right, Rob?
Well, exactly. And little did I know that it was actually harder. But at the time, the environment, pushed me down that route. So yeah, it's an interesting one because actually, when you think about fast bowling, it has a different type of sort of rigor. But in many ways, bowling spin, especially long spells, is probably as rigorous or if not harder, I suppose.
So when you watch somebody bowl spin today, whether that's a junior or a professional player, what tells you that they're someone who can genuinely influence the game as opposed to being someone who just looks technically good? In other words, what makes a good spinner for you?
I think it's an interesting question. It depends on what age. I would say I don't really look at that to see whether or not someone can impact the game first and foremost. My first sort of question as a coach would be, why are they here? What do they want to achieve? Because oftentimes, through the experiences that you mentioned, we like to project our own sort of careers onto people and think, oh, this guy wants to go and be a professional cricketer. And we start that journey really early. And actually, someone might just be really loving the fact they see the ball spin. And so one of the things I'd say about a good spinner, I suppose, if you said what does make a good spinner, I would say, actually, I'd broaden that out to cricket in general. I think cricket is problem solving in uncertain conditions. And therefore, a good spinner is one that can problem solve in uncertain conditions. And you might think, well, Rob, that's ridiculously vague. Try and drill down into, come on, I want to know the golden bullet. What is the thing that's going to make someone brilliant? But the truth of the matter is, there is no formula, is there? If I said, you got a bowl at 55 miles per hour, then Adil Rashid says, hang on a minute, what about me? I'm pretty good. I bowl at 48. Or if you say you got to rip it like Shane Warne, Anil Kumble sticks his hand up and says, well, I only moved it that far both ways. What about me? I was okay, wasn't I? And so the beauty of the game is in the problem solving. And lots of people talk about cricket replicating life, and actually, if you broaden it out to life, what is life? Life is actually problem solving in uncertain conditions. And so when you think about that, and you think about what makes a good spinner in the environments we create, yes, there are going to be some things that allow them to problem solve better, and if they have more ability to spin the ball hard or spin the ball in both directions, they're going to be able to solve a wider number of problems. But there are some very, very good spinners who bowled very, very well, doing one thing really, really well. And oftentimes they got unstuck maybe once or twice a year, but actually they were very, very successful just doing that one niche thing. And so I suppose in answer to your question would be, when I look at someone, are they really passionate? Are they really enjoying it? Are they asking questions and immersing themselves in the problems that come up? And even better, can they create them in which is what a pretty sterile environment for 7 months? What I hate seeing is people standing side on with no run up, bowling at a cone, which I see a lot of. And it doesn't match my experience to say that will help that player. And we see a lot of people just working really hard and putting in a lot of effort, but then they don't see the progression, get frustrated, and then, at times fall out of love with the game. And we see that quite a lot.
So what do you think progression looks like for a spinner? Because for a pace bowler, I guess it's kind of a little bit more obvious. You'd be looking to get quicker as you got older and maybe be more consistent. But for spin, yeah, how do you see that? How do you see that progression? What can they expect to be looking out for as they're moving along in their journeys?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's difficult to answer, isn't it? Because I suppose the first question I always ask is, what's the context, or who is standing in front of me? And you think about, well, anyone, they're just like the most ridiculous Rubik's Cube that you're trying to help solve. And, you've got these 2x2. I remember my son getting those 2x2 ones, which are really easy to solve. And then you've got if you actually look them up, they've got ones that are like 23x23. I think maybe I might be a 23x23, and you're trying to work out with their guidance what they want to do, right? Because ultimately, again, I know I'm banging on about this, but ultimately it doesn't really matter what I want them to do. Part of me, I can't think of anything worse than bowling spin right now. That's me done. So why should I project anything onto this person? Because they're coming from a much purer place right now. And it's their journey. And we know from, the science, that if you give people autonomy, the choice to do things themselves, that it helps to develop that passion. And I said before, I look for passion. So the first question I would ask is, how do I create an environment where they have that passion. But I do have a framework that I would like young cricketers to go through, and it might not be necessarily what you're looking for in terms of a technical, but actually in terms of cricket mind, I think this actually relates quite well. And it is, how does someone relate to the game? So first and foremost, if I was working with someone, can we get them to feel like they belong in the game, that they feel safe in that space to try, to explore new things? What can they do? Maybe there's someone who can do something that we couldn't do. You know, there's different ways. The leg spinner, Gleason, came up with a way of spinning the ball in a different way. Sack Lane came up with something before anyone else. What about this young person? Have they got something that we haven't seen before that could be quite special? And try not to shut that down and allow them to know that in this environment it's safe to make mistakes. And if we can create that in the young people and create that passion, they're going to have that longevity. And I think before, you guys have talked about how do you get resilience in sport? How do you get resilience in cricket? Actually, the best way to have resilience is just to have passion, because you don't think it's difficult. You just enjoy being in those moments. And often we shut things down early because we might have a session plan and it's not going the way we wanted it to go because this guy's just doing what he wants. You can't do what you want in my sessions. Well, actually, if you think about it, that's a ridiculous thing to say, isn't it? If it's safe and the person's doing what they want, well, wow, that's a great thing. And often in educational environments, if you think about young people now, when do they actually get to do what they want? They're spoon-fed quite a lot. They have to do 10 GCSEs. Sport gives them a real opportunity to go and do and be who they want. And at times, we'll all have seen it, coaches have a different agenda and they want them to be a certain way. And I think that's dangerous. So making sure that they feel safe to try and do new things is really, really important. But then I'd sort of add on to that, like getting them as a next stage to understand the context that they're in. So what am I actually doing today? Who's batting? What's the field? What's the scenario? And try and build up that picture and experience, because that's what they'll be pulling from in future times. And that's actually how we learn. We pull from our previous memories, good and bad, and we create the next memory.
Totally get that. So I agree with the passion. You said something at the start. You said something like, I can't think of anything worse than bowling spin at the moment. What did you mean by that?
Oh, that's just the pain that goes with the body, and the realization. Actually, I was thinking about this podcast and I was thinking about, this is the crazy thing. So I talk about, how do we create an environment where we solve the problems we're going to solve? And if I was talking about my career, so like the thing I failed at, I was quite good at one day cricket. Yeah. But in England, you get wheeled out twice a year and you're told at Old Trafford, take 12 wickets in the game and win the game for us. Well, we never practiced that all winter. Like, we'd never create a scenario where I was the man, it was my turn, and I was going to bowl someone out on a spinning wicket. And I thought back just now, and I thought to myself, it's actually crazy to think that that someone would be able to do that if they were never put in that situation very often. And I'd hope that if we were creating environments now for young people, that we do start to create those different environments. I mean, that's a bit of a niche skill now, isn't it? If you think about where the game's going. But if we're not giving people the opportunity, so when you get to the end of and again, I don't really talk about, it's not really a therapy session for me, but when you get to the end of your career, I think, Woody, you probably feel and have told me the same. Like, you don't actually want to go out and perform because you've got that much fear in you that you can't do the job and you feel like you're going to let people down. And you don't really know what you're doing. Like, all the stuff that I'm talking about, don't think I knew that when I was playing, because I absolutely didn't. and actually spin as an industry is very, very underserved. They don't have counties don't really have spin coaches that are with them like they do. Your bowling coach is there all the time, tends to be a seam bowling coach. Bang for buck, you got 6 seamers. So the spin coach often, if you were to ring up 18 counties, I reckon 16 say, yeah, no, we cover spin. We've got X on 30 days a year. And I say, well, what about the young spinner for the next, one of the toughest arts, but he can ring someone up because he's always at the end of the phone, as long as it's in that 30 days. And so that support isn't there. So that's a petrifying thing, isn't it? So that's probably why. But I think the overriding thing, I think I could probably get over it, and if my body was not in so much pain from wheeling away.
Okay, so with the passion thing, what are the indicators that someone does have that level of passion that you're looking for? Because some people, in my experience, are pretty good at hiding that passion. How do you reveal that in somebody? How do you know if somebody's got that passion?
I keep talking about environment. So one, it'd be a shame someone would hide that in the environments that we create, because that's something that would be really valued and rewarded. So I doubt they would in our environments, but you give opportunities for them to show that, don't you? So we often, if I was in charge of any program and I had the resource, I would have free play. So not just nets where people can come, and not like naughty boy nets where you have to turn up because the coach expects it, like genuine free play, but also um, other ways for people to engage in the game. So we play a lot of outdoor cricket on Astros where people are not compelled to come. In fact, all areas of my programs that I run personally, and I would do the same for pretty much all of it, aren't compulsory. You don't have to be there. So people show passion by turning up, right? But also people show passion by just bugging you. Like, can we do an extra session? Like, actually, yeah, we can, but this is like your 18th this week. Can we turn it down a little bit? So, ultimately, people show that passion by their actions and their behaviours, I would say. What do you think? How do you think people show that?
I think you're absolutely right about the environment, because sometimes an environment can subdue that passion. Some people don't feel confident enough to bring that out because the environment might criticize them, or it might belittle them, or it might mock them for being so passionate. So the environment is important, but I think not everybody not every player will be fortunate enough to be in a Rob Ferley environment. There'll be plenty of players who are in different environments that perhaps they don't feel comfortable enough to be able to show that passion. It is quite a difficult one, but I do take your point. You mentioned also about managing pressure. What do you think are the main psychological challenges that spinners face, and do you think actually that those challenges are fully understood within the game?
It's hard to know whether they're fully understood. There isn't a huge amount of evidence to say that people are thinking about this. Um, but I'm not going around every centre watching. So that's my caveat. In terms of managing pressure, I think it comes into, if you think about what pressure is, it's when you have a situation and you don't feel like you have the tools to meet the demand that's in front of you. And that's essentially the definition of anxiety, isn't it? So if you think again about your environments, if we were to say if we got a young spinner on, or we work with a young spinner, often people would say, well, what are you working on in the nets? I bet they would talk about where their arms and feet went, first and foremost. But I like to frame it in a different way. Like, what problem are you solving today? And in terms of helping people to manage pressure. It's the same as any type of inoculation. So I'd call it stress inoculation. So what is the thing that you are finding pressurized? You don't like it. You don't want to be there. It's creating fear and anxiety. Okay, we need to give you a little dose of that, and we need to prepare you for that, and we need to allow you to keep building up. So when COVID came round, we all got a little dose of COVID, and we were essentially inoculized against it, and we were protected against it. The same with cricket. We have to put people into those scenarios, but not make that stretch too high that they can't succeed, so they can keep jumping over the barrier, and then one day they'll surprise themselves and they'll be somewhere where they didn't think they'd be. And they've understood that journey and understood they can do it. And it's interesting, isn't it? You'll see in batters a lot of the time, they'll score their first 100. Often the next week, they'll score their second as well, because they've realized that they can do it and they've got a plan of how to do it. So that would be how I would think about trying to create situations where people can manage pressure.
With you talked about there at the beginning, you feel you don't have the resources to meet the demands. One of the resources that we encourage people to use and is research based as being effective is support from others. And from what you've said so far, it sounds like maybe bowling spin can be quite isolating, and it can feel like there is less support there for a spinner, particularly when they're younger and things like that. Would you say that that's kind of accurate?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I can think of spinners in the county game that I know that really just they don't they don't get any support, and there's a lot of them you would think are really confident, and there's a lot of bravado, but that's all they really have because they have to bluff. And actually, what that does, and we talked about this, Woody, just now, is it creates this barrier to being open, because they don't feel, then they create this bravado because they don't have any support and they've got to look like they're coping. But that also means that they then, the coach might be trying to make them feel open, but they won't necessarily feel that secure. And I think we're seeing this a lot in professional game, where people are actually having coaches outside of their environments because they say it's the place that they feel that they can actually go and be vulnerable. And I'm hoping that as we evolve and what we know about environments, and actually it's not necessarily about the coaches not coaching well, it's actually understanding what's coming up. We've got a generation of young people who've gone through COVID, who are engaged in social media, have a lot of different ways of looking at life. And actually, I'm 44. I'm a dinosaur now. Like, that's crazy, isn't it? Like, I feel like I'm really young, and I feel like I understand kids, but to be honest with you, they're massively different to me. And if I wasn't working with them every day, sometimes they still blow my mind with the stuff they come out with. And I think, Christ, I'm now old, right? But most of the people running those environments are actually older than me as well, and actually haven't been exposed to the environments of seeing these young people come through. And actually, that's probably at times creating that little bit of a barrier to that full understanding and creating those environments.
If you're a dinosaur at 44, Rob, then I'm not sure
I
what
know.
that makes me, but it don't make me feel better. I was in a good mood before I
I
came on
know,
this podcast.
exactly.
For those who haven't got much experience of bowling spin or, coaching spinners, when you're in a match situation, can you kind of explain how being hit for a boundary can affect the thinking, the feeling, the behaviour of a spinner? Can you take
Yeah, I
yourself
mean,
back to that being, that being a 14-year-old, not the 44-year-old version? Can you take yourself back and just give us a sense of what it's like?
I think one of the strengths I had was that I was blissfully unaware. If I'm honest, I just didn't ever really engage. I actually don't think I had a huge amount of skill, but I didn't necessarily feel pressure. I felt quite confident, and I was reasonably successful going through, and I think that helped. But I think it depends on the environment, doesn't it? Because I would say to anyone managing a side or captaining that side, I would say, if you think about a young spinner bowling, and again, this is challenging because I don't particularly care about the result, because I care about developing players. So certainly in club environments, as you go through, either if you're saying you want to help people develop, then often the result is not necessarily that important. We're trying to win, but if you take the result out of it, like, how would you act? Someone getting hit for 4 wouldn't necessarily change what you would want to do. But I, I sort of skipped around the question there. But in terms of that real advice, and I go back to Shane Warne. I remember Rob Key told me a story about, he was playing in Perth and he was playing quite well, and he actually got 50. He ran down the wicket. England were in terrible trouble, had lost loads of wickets. They were not doing well. And he ran down the wicket and he hit Shane Warne for 6 over mid-off. And I remember watching that. And Shane Warne put someone on the boundary on long off, and they were under the pump, and Kesey was like, what am I going to do now? Like, I've actually got no options. He's just blocked off my options. So if, again, hit for 4 is a negative for a young spinner, which it might be seen as, I think actually younger people don't necessarily, I think they're a bit braver. I certainly don't seem to think that people necessarily get that affected by that. But if they are, actually how we frame fielders on the boundary and stopping those boundaries actually being a positive, and trying to control the batter into hitting balls into areas that they're less comfortable with, I think can be framed as a real positive. So actually, if you're setting a field for a spinner, having people out, like, I remember someone saying you should never set a field for a bad ball. And my challenge back to that is, what if I'm going to bowl one twice and over? Surely it'd be a very good idea to do that. Like, I know you can say, well, you need to be better, mate, but it's like, well, actually, no, I think you'd prefer me to go for 2 rather than 8, right? So I don't really see it as, I mean, I think it would be ridiculous to not have people out on the boundary, for those 2 reasons. One, it's going to save a boundary, so it's defensive, but it's also attacking, isn't it? Because it blocks off areas.
Yeah, Shane talks about, or he did talk about, attacking with the ball and defending with the field into, which is what you were alluding to before. There is a view that captains in this country, anyway, don't always get the best out of the spinners. Do you agree with this? And if so, why do you think that? Why do you think that is the case?
I think it depends on what level and what game. I think if you look at the professional game, there's 2 sides of that coin, because a lot of the sides that do well in short format are the sides with the good spinners, especially the people that bowl leg spin have a bit of mystery about them. But when you look at the 4-day stuff, with when it's been played, the counties aren't rewarded for sort of bowling spin, are they? I always hate to, it's sort of a bit harsh, isn't it? People always talk about Darren Stevens, even he's been retired for 3 years now. But, people like, he gets bowled rather than a spinner, because actually early on in April and late in September, it's quite a difficult problem to solve, right? And it's very, very difficult to bowl spin when it's freezing cold. Like, it's actually really hard. So these are environmental factors that make it pretty difficult. And I often think, imagine if you could be in charge of the game and your remit was like, we're going to develop spinners. I actually think it's quite a good idea to say that, to have like a quota of the amount of overs that need to be bowled by a spinner, for both sides, because ultimately, the only way that spin is developed is with people bowling lots of balls and bowling in match situations. In terms of young spinners, I think captaincy is pretty difficult for any young person. And if you think about it, I remember having this argument with a netball coach. I said captaincy in netball and captaincy in cricket are completely different. You there is no other sport where you have, as a player, the whole game in your hands, and you can ruin someone's game. You just don't bowl them and don't bat them, which is a remarkable power to be wielding, right? Or you've got a feeling about something and you just tell people what to do. No other sport has a captain that has that bigger impact on the game. Um, like I can't think of one where they have that much control. And we give that to 11-year-olds. Like, they don't know what they're doing, do they? It's very, very difficult. So one of the bits of advice I would say to someone and is as a bowler and as a captain, you have to be able to let someone set their field. And you may know that their field isn't going to work, but it's really important that they have the freedom to make that call and learn that lesson. Because again, I still challenge anyone. You might think you know. I've actually seen this in girls' cricket quite a lot, where I look at a field and I think to myself, not sure about this field. And then 3 balls later, caught in the position that I said was wrong. Like, because they're in the game, and if you think about the game, it's what is the scenario? Where do I want to put my chess pieces to get the dismissal? So, like, if they're right, right? If it ends up being right, it's right. If not, what happens? They learn, and they learn from those scenarios. So there's so many good things that can happen if you let someone take charge in that way.
On the both the captain player relationship and the kind of perception of spinners, do you think there's a difference between a batter who bowls a bit of spin and a spinner who can't really bat, in terms of how they are treated, the support they're given, the respect they're given, all of that kind of thing?
Yes, and it's something I never thought about, Bryony. That's an interesting one. What I do know is that the game seems to value, obviously, a batter who can bowl a bit of spin. So the craft of bowling spin has been marginalised in my view. So I would say, I don't know whether it's a respect thing, but I would say that, Will Jacks, for example, is seen as a valuable asset. But a pure spinner. So Nathan Lyon isn't getting picked up in the IPL, is he? So there is this perception that we can get away with spin, and we don't need to pick a full-time spinner. And I think that's really flawed, because if you think about critical moments, when you think about championships, when you think about World Cups, they're often played on pitches that have been worn. And often at the back end of tournaments, a really good spinner will win you games. And you're throwing the ball to, a part-time spinner and expecting them to do the job. And I think, I don't really want to get into the England setup, but I think that they have essentially taken a punt on spin and not necessarily seen it as something that's really valuable. But all of the best sides in the world have always had a frontline spinner that has been able to impact the game in 2 main ways, which is, one, control the game when the deck is flat, and then, when it's spinning, they win games of cricket for them.
So you become the new England head coach of the Red Bull team, and all things being equal, and I know you might say it depends, but all things being equal, who do you put your investment in? The decent spinner who's a decent batter, or the brilliant spinner who's a walking wicket?
Well, the question is, how good are they, right? Because if it's Warne or Murali, you're picking them, right? So you're always asking those questions. But I think, again, this is where I think we're too binary. Why are we making such binary choices? Why not develop loads of people? It's not that difficult, is it? Like, the ECB should be, if this is a problem, like, I don't know what they talk about in their reviews, but I'd be talking about, how do we create these over the next 4 years? How are we going to create a situation where we can pick from 10 spinners and they're all really good. What would we need to do to achieve that? And I think that's quite easy, which is the ECB know that they can't rely on counties to create spinners, because the need is to win games of cricket in the championship. So they'll pick what they pick. So you might have spin, you might not. But there's a hell of a lot of time in the season now, and there is in the women's game as well, to create opportunities for spinners to go out of their county environment into an ECB environment. And, you could work with someone 20, 25 days a year, or over the course of the year, you could work and create programs where you're spending 50, 60 days creating problems, specific problems that allow you to talent ID and spot, who's good at solving problems, not just the results that they've had, but what are they like in this scenario, what are they like in this scenario, rather than just taking a guess and, looking at someone's height and thinking that that might relate to someone being good. Very binary sort of service level talent ID, I suppose, because you could do things like, and by the way, we're not very good at playing spin, are we, at the top level? So how about having a 4-day game where you just pick spinners and batters, and you play on warm wickets, and you just bowl spin all day, and you bat against spin all day. And at the end of the year, you've had 40 people through that program who have had 30 days of those experiences. So when they do track over to India, they could genuinely, perhaps, I still think you should probably have some sort of a warm up, but you could get straight into it, right? So again, I just don't think, your question really is, who do you invest in? You invest in everyone, right? We're England cricket. We've got a lot of money. We should be investing in a lot of people.
But I think with that, there is a part, even children, young children already put themselves in a bit of a box. You'll often find I'm a batter, and then they move to hardball, and actually now, I'm a bowler now. They sort of like to be, I think a lot of us like to be very good at one thing rather than decent at multiple things. It's nice to feel like you could actually have your kind of unique selling point within a team.
Yeah, but I think, again, maybe I'm too optimistic. I think you can, if you think about Olympic sport, they train for 6 hours a day, right? We go and have a net for an hour and think that we've worked hard. Like, you can be brilliant at both things. You can be a brilliant batter, or good enough, like, especially, by the way, now the currency has been out to hit sixes. I think you can be good at both. I don't think there's the. I think it's harder to just do one thing as well. If you're a batter and you don't bowl, then what are you doing the rest of the time? You might as well have a bowl. So I think, the messaging around being a multi-dimensional cricketer is there from a young age. I actually think, Riley, you're right. I think they do get boxed because they get picked early as something, and then the opportunities that they're given because they were good at that something was that, well, actually, you're my fast bowler, so you bat 10. And therefore, they're not giving those opportunities from ages 11, 12, 13. And ultimately, they become linked to that identity. And that's where I would probably challenge the environment again and say, actually, when we're creating these opportunities, why are we not sharing round batting orders? Why aren't we why is the wicket keeper not getting the opportunity to bowl? Like, ultimately, I know this will infuriate people, but it really doesn't matter. Like, when you're 11, 12, 13, like, what is the end game? If you're really competitive and you want to win things, well, what do you want to win? Because you can win at 13 or you can win at 18, 19, 20. So I'd far rather be winning at 18, 19, 20, which means that at 12, 13, 14, we need to be opening up those opportunities and giving lots of other people chances. So I think it's difficult because a lot of the questions that you're asking me, I feel like I'm giving really vague answers to. It's not my intention, but I think it's all about like the systems and the environments, and actually, um, I found it fascinating that we have not even drilled down into like arms and legs and technique, which is kind of again just keeps reiterating to me like that the spin more than any other endeavor is all in the mind, and that ability to control oneself and be able to keep fronting up.
So I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is you've been sacked as England head coach because you wanted to pick everyone and you couldn't decide on a final team. But the good news, Rob, is that you've now been made ECB spin bowling lead, and you have carte blanche to develop the system for young spin bowlers. So what, in this new role that you've got, what areas would you want coaches and those developing young spinners to prioritise?
I might get sacked here, as well, because the answers, I think, are pretty straightforward. Like create, and by the way, I just don't think this happens. Create a problem in your session and let someone solve it. And when it gets hard and they can't, don't give them the answer. Give them options to change, like the session. It could be like, you can change your field, or, you, you can change the target, make it more difficult, make it easier. And I think you'd be surprised at how people would evolve and develop. So the curriculum, I mean, I have a curriculum and I have a set of games, but to change to change all of this, you have to change the environments that we train in. And I think the biggest problem that young spinners have is for 7 months of the year, they go into a hall. It's pretty flat in those halls. If you've ever trained on those green things, I mean, they're soul destroying. The ball hardly turns. And then you get batters who just love smashing you, and you think to yourself, I'm rubbish, right? So you haven't even engaged in the game there. You've run out and you've tried to bowl the ball either at a cone, or you've tried to hide it because you don't want someone to whack it. And so you're not playing the game. So if I was in charge, I would be looking at each of the environments and saying, how do we create environments that allow us to develop spinners who spin the ball? So one of the interesting facts about the best spinners that we've produced in the last 20 years is they've all the time played on wickets where counties have either raked or affected their wickets, and the ball has spun more. They've had more reward, and they then want to do it. They want to spin the ball harder because they can see something actually happening. And so how can we change the flooring to make it spin? And you can do that. There's certain mats you can put down. But again, how often do they get put down? Like twice a year. We're going to try that now. The mat should be down all the time. Like the ball should be spinning all the time. It's fascinating. I think there's a story here, and I think this is really, really important, and it's fundamental to any coaching. There's a story that Neil Tyson deGrasse, the scientist, tells, and it's a very, very simple story. He's walking in New York, and there's a child with a parent, and they're walking along, and it's raining, and there's puddles, and they've got all of the protective equipment in there. They're all really safe. They can't get wet, and they're walking up to it, and he's watching this kid, and he's going, "Please let her jump in the puddle. Let her jump in the puddle," because his mind's going, that's a whole world of science, action, reforce, all of the molecules, everything happened, immerse in this great thing that is science in action. And just as they get to it, the parent pulls her away and doesn't let her drive. And in that moment, you've squashed that bit of curiosity, that little childlike fun. So in our sessions, it's a roundabout way of saying, if spin is interesting, it's interesting because the ball spins or bounces or does something unusual. But without seeing that and being reinforced, how are you going to create that curiosity and passion and want to come back and do it again? And that's why, Shane Warne would say, when you're a spinner, like spin the ball really hard. But if you don't get any reward for spinning the ball really hard, why are you going to bother? You might as well just be more accurate and just come down the side of the ball. And so there are things you can do. How often do we set fields, and how often are we accountable for where the ball goes and how many runs we've got? And you can create those environments. I told you, Nathan, I'm not a salesman, but I've actually created my own environment, and I'm not selling it, but it's got different areas. So every time someone bowls in our nets, there is a field that's set. We can play games. We have one game, so I'll tell you what it is. We've got banners that go around the side. They're different colours, and it's called Colour Wheel, and it's a brilliant game between spinners. And all you have to do is you've got, I think, Trivial Pursuit. You've got little wedges, and you say to your mate, he's going to hit it in the green, right? And you have to get the batter to hit it in the green. And if they do, you tick that off, and you go round. And if you get a wicket, you can knock off whatever one you want as well. So you got a choice there, because you can now try and be attacking and take a wicket and therefore knock off the harder areas, or you can try and control that. And if you think about that game, what you're doing there is you're saying to someone, how can I control someone by the field that I set? Because, for example, if you want to get someone to hit it through mid-on and you're bowling left-arm spin, that's not a strong option. Well, why don't you take out your mid-on and try and encourage them to hit it there? And they'll say, well, actually, they'll move that, and they'll say, well, I can't get them to hit it there. And you say to them, well, actually, what else can you do? And this comes back again. We keep coming back to him, the great Shane Warne. What would he do? He'd have a bit of a chat, wouldn't he? Do you not think you're good enough to hit me through there? I thought you were supposed to be a good batter. I've left a massive gap, and you can't even hit me down there. And ultimately, you're trying to get the batsman to do what you want to do and immerse themselves in the art. But if there's nothing good that's happening out of the environment, and the ball's just sliding on, you're getting hit all the time, and you don't think you're good enough, then you're not getting rewarded for doing the things that we want to see. And therefore, you're not going to develop those skills and end up being where we want to be. So what I would do as lead is I would change the environment. It doesn't have to be my system, but create situations where there are problems that need to be solved. And if you create those environments, you won't need me or you to tell coaches what to do. They'll have so many ideas when they're in those environments. And actually, if you give kids responsibility, they come up with even better games, because what do kids love doing? They love playing games. And like we're dinosaurs, so we've forgotten what it's like to be a kid and play games. And when you do play games, and like people say, oh, this games-based coaching is a load of nonsense. It's like, well, actually what you're doing is you're creating those situations where there's a win and a loss. You're creating situations where people have to manage emotions. You're creating situations where people have to control what the batter's going to do. And so all of the things that we're not very good at the top level, you're just giving exposure to. And that, so again, not like 1, 2, this is what I do, list 1, 2, and 3, but I'll just be forensically looking at environments and saying, what is it that we want from these people, and how do we shape the environment to do it?
We will come on to square one, because I do want to explore that. Steve Bull, who was a sports psychologist a long time ago at ECB, he used to talk about environment shapes behaviour. So it's not a new theory, is it? But it's something that hasn't been perhaps used to the maximum in most coaching environments. So we'll come on to that. But before we do, you mentioned two words there which kind of got my ears burning. You mentioned science, and then you mentioned art. And people often use phrases like the art of spin bowling or the craft of spin bowling, but you don't often hear, or I don't hear people talk about the science of spin bowling. So why do you think that is? And would you like to start hearing people use that phrase a bit more? Because you hear it with fast bowling, don't you? You know, there's science around fast bowling, but spin, it tends to be art, it tends to be craft. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of work to do, especially in women's sport. We don't have enough. Well, we have very, very few scientific papers on women's sport, so we're projecting what we think we know onto women, which may be right, may be wrong, who knows? So there needs to be more into that, but it comes back to this investment in it, doesn't it? Because the only reason people research things is, well, this is a bit pessimistic, but if you go back to when the big bulk of research happened, it was in the late 80s and 90s when it became really profitable to win. So in American sports, instead of, because there's large amounts of money's now being involved and the professionalization of sport, it was now really important to actually work out, well, actually, what does the science say about this? Because I want to be making sure that I'm not wasting my money and we're getting the biggest bang for buck. So when you come back to spin bowling, it's quite a niche area, isn't it? So there isn't much data on it. I think there are a couple. Well, I know there are a couple of papers on spin bowling, but they don't really draw too many conclusions. And one in particular, one is, uh, probably not that valid. It's a longitudinal study, and it just looks back and people have had interviews and talk about what they think they did rather than actually any scientific experiences. Um, so, do I think we need it? Well, it'd be nice to know, wouldn't it? And what is the art and what is science? It's an interesting question, isn't it? People talk about art being more about feel and science being a bit more clinical than that. So again, I mean, I think you've asked me 10 questions and I haven't really answered one like properly yet. So I'm feeling very embarrassed.
I wonder if the art bit is also some sort of subtle reference to the psychological aspects of spin that we've talked about here, about how that is such a big factor and that is much harder to measure and to kind of learn, because you can have somebody who's got it all, can turn the ball, whatever, and then they get the yips or whatever, and they just suddenly can't do it anymore, and every ball's a drag down. So the science is less helpful in that sort of situation because they don't know what's happening with their body, and it just feels like they can't do it. And that seems to happen less in pace bowling.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in terms of an environment, if we're thinking about the yips, I think there has actually been quite a few studies on the yips as well, especially in golf. But I would then lean and think about how we're coaching young people. And over the last 10 years, with the professionalization of coaching, with the fact that, people are paid to coach, um, people want this tangible idea that my son or daughter has been helped. And therefore, I can't justify standing there for an hour and saying nothing to this person. So I'm going to tell them to, get their alignment right, or, get their front arm going here, or come have this certain type of run. And what that does is it brings a lot of conscious awareness to spinners, and the more that we think, the less likely we are that we're going to be able to perform that under pressure. I don't need to tell you guys this, this, but like for me, in terms of like coaching young spinners, how do we again create the environment for that change to happen? Um, and I learned a few years back about this term reinvestment theory, and it really, really helped me in my coaching, because I learned that the more that someone has to think about something when they're learning it, the less likely they are to be able to um, perform that under pressure. So if you think about the yips, for example, something goes wrong, someone goes looking for answers, they can't find them, so they start thinking about it more, they start investing more energy in thinking about it, and all of a sudden, when it comes to actually bowling the ball, they can't actually do it because there's too much going on. So it makes perfect sense when you have that piece of information. The science part of it, when you say Like, there's actually is more science in the mental side. There are terms like reinvestment. There are a lot of things that people can do that we know scientifically will help them. But actually, from a technique point of view, what we know about bowling spin is we know one thing at this point in time, that if you release the ball in front here with your hips slightly past the horizontal, then theoretically you should get more spin on the ball, which means there's a million ways of actually getting into that position. So we actually know more from a science point of view from the mental side than we do from a technical side.
Rob, I'm conscious that Brian's got a flight to catch and you've got dinner booked, so we've probably got about 10 more minutes. Let's talk about some of those environments that you've been creating at Square One, which is, for listeners who aren't familiar with Square One, it's a huge new cricket centre in Brighton, and it's got a lot of technology and innovation embedded into the facility. So, Rob, can you give us a sense of, what it's all about, the reason why it's needed, and, what your long-term vision for Square One is?
Yeah, so Square One ultimately wants to be the most inclusive cricket centre in the world. So we want to create a place where if it's your first time playing the game or you're a pro, it's elite level. So like the best experience that anyone can have as a first timer, as well as if you're a professional cricketer. And it is a remarkable place. And I feel confidence to say there is no other place on the planet like it. And there are very specific reasons for this. Everything that we do is evidence-based. I say that with a smirk after what I've just said. But it comes out of the fact that we wanted to create an environment that allowed people to gamify and play the game. I think we've become very good at training drills and training for cricket, but we haven't been very good at training cricket, i.e. problem solving in uncertain conditions. And what we know is if we're trying to develop anything, that we must play within the game, because often the game, if we're training technique alone, we're never playing in a game where technique alone will stand up. And actually, if you go to a net, often we're only thinking about our ball. We don't see the outcome. There's no pressure. There's none of the mental skills required. So just by having a game, you bring it back to being involving the technical, tactical, physical, mental, social, cognitive, emotional, whatever you want to say. But the whole thing is being trained. What we have in there is the opportunity for someone to come along, bowl the ball, hit the ball, and get scoring out of the back of it. So if you've ever been to the golf range where you see what happens to your bowl, or you could hit the ball into a sort of screen and you can play around the golf. In our environment, in every single lane, you can play those games. But what we've also done is we've layered on top this color-based system that allows people to have a reference as well. So, they can look up on the screen and see that someone's standing in the red area. And when they look into the net, they see the red area, and they might look up again and see that lilac has no fielder in there. And when they look in, they can see the lilac and they can match it up, so they can start to build that picture in their heads. And what we do know is that professional players like a Joe Root, when he goes into the net, he sees this all the time. But when we're younger, we don't see that. When we're young, we don't have those memories to pull on. So it's basically creating opportunities to have a reference system that is accurate and then ties up the feeling to actually then hit where they want to do, when to bowl. So again, what I would encourage anyone to do is have a look online or come and have a look, because ultimately that sounds a little like nonsense, doesn't it? It's hard to explain, but when you see it, you probably get it.
No, it's a terrific system that you've developed there. Brighton is quite far from us up in the north and, other people. Have you got any plans to create any more centres up and down the country, or is it just Brighton and it's worth going for, no matter where you are in the country.
We did have a boy who, in the Scottish half term, because the other thing we're doing is making our access really cheap. It was cheaper for him to book as an off-peak member. He flew down with his mum, stayed in the hotel, played cricket in our centre 5 hours a day, and flew back up. And it was cheaper than booking a net in Edinburgh. So I'm not suggesting you do that. Our plan, what's our big wish? So if we want to make cricket more inclusive, we stated our aim really is to build this to be in 150 sites, so that wherever you are in the country, you can access a brilliant environment that's going to be welcoming and inclusive. It's going to give you options to take part in cricket in the way that you want to on your own time, and is non-judgmental. Like, you don't have to go and play league cricket. You don't have to want to be a professional cricketer. You can turn up, you can use the centre as you want, and then you can go home, and that's fine, because you're engaging in cricket. And we believe it's a powerful game, and there's lots to learn that can transfer into life. And so, however you want to access that, that's great.
Very, very exciting. You said earlier that you're conscious that you didn't answer any of our questions. So you've got one final chance, and you've got 1 minute to answer this. So a bit of time pressure. For any young spinners listening to this, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give them to become a top performer if that's what they wanted?
When you're given a piece of advice from a coach, if it doesn't make you better within 3 balls, forget about it.
I love it. And that was short. That's amazing,
Oh.
Rob. Rob, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. I think it turns out that Chat GPT did get it right after all, actually. Before we let you go, for those who want to find out a bit more about Square One and what you're building there, where is the best place for them to go and find out that info?
Yeah, Square One Cricket Complex on Instagram, and or support at squareoneeducation.co.uk, and we'll get back to them with any questions. But we've got some fun content. We partner with Cricket District, and there's some really good stuff going on at the centre. So Instagram's probably the best place.
Great. Well, we'll stick those details in the show notes. Thank you again. We do wish you the very best of luck with it. I don't think you need luck, but everyone needs a bit of luck, don't they? But it sounds a terrific initiative and an ambitious one. So go well with that, Rob.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. And I saw a plug from me. If anyone is thinking about your programs and thinking about whether or not they should take the plunge, I would fully encourage them, given how much we've talked about how much the mind is important in not just for spin bowling, but for cricket, but to get online and hit you guys up to get some help from you.
That £5 is in the post. Thank you so much. Right, coming up on the next episode, we've got Ellie Threckeld joining us, the Lancashire wicketkeeper, who will also be playing in this season's 100 for MI London. So if you don't want to miss that or any other episodes, and please do subscribe to the pod and maybe even give us a cheeky rating and review. Bryony, it's holiday time, I think. So shall we call that stumps?
Yes, let's. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.